Today, we are addressing the health of our nation. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, everything feels broken, especially in my home province of British Columbia. Drugs, disorder, violent crime are all on the rise in our neighborhoods. People are lining up at food banks in record numbers because they can't afford groceries. Many can't afford a home. And worst of all, the opioid crisis is claiming the lives of our sons and daughters. Under the watch of this Prime Minister, there have been 34,000 opioid deaths, and that number is growing by the day. In BC alone, overdose deaths are up 330%, by far the worst rate of all provinces. The BC coroner released a report today saying that 206 people died of overdose in April. 1 month, 206 people, including one death at a safe injection site. The report said 70% of victims are between the ages of 30 and 59. People in that age bracket should be buying a home, having children, and enjoying successful careers. Instead, in the Prime Minister's Canada, they are chasing their next hit. Why? Because all three levels of government, including the federal Liberals, the provincial NDP, this NDP caucus, and left-wing mayors and councils have decriminalized illicit drugs, flooded the streets with so-called safe supply, and have failed to create the treatment and connection needed for people suffering with addictions to build a drug-free life. Over 800 people have died in the first 4 months of this year. If overdose deaths continue at this pace, we could lose up to 2,400 British Columbians this year. Death by overdose cannot be normalized. Instead, we need treatment and recovery. These programs will help those struggling with addictions, and we need them now. The Liberal NDP coalition is flooding our streets with drugs and supercharging this opioid crisis. One Global News reporter took to the streets of Vancouver to find out where are all these safe supply drugs going. The reporter was able to buy 26 hits of safe supply drugs for only $30 in just 30 minutes on Vancouver's downtown east side. Outreach workers on Vancouver's downtown east side claim that the safe supply hydromorphone tablets can be bought for as little as 25 cents per pill on the streets. No wonder the BC coroner reports 7 people per day are dying from drug overdoses in my province. This heavy amount of free drugs on our streets perpetuates the addiction cycle, prolongs suffering, and prevents recovery. It's leading to more deaths, not less. How many more Canadians must die before this Prime Minister learns that treatment, not free drugs, save lives? We need to help get people off drugs so they can effectively address their addiction issues, enjoy improved health, reconnect with family, get jobs, and become contributing members of society. Let's be clear. This government's radical agenda is fueling the opioid crisis. They use the term safe supply as though it were a medical term, but in truth, that phrase is nothing more than marketing jargon used by Big Pharma. Let's speak the truth. There is nothing safe about safe supply. The Liberal and NDP drug pushers point to other jurisdictions that have decriminalized hard drugs to justify their radical agenda. For example, they say Portugal set the gold standard for decriminalization of illicit drugs. But they forgot to mention Portugal ensured treatment and recovery services were expanded before they changed the laws. They also omit that health outcomes in Portugal have worsened since they decreased treatment services. What's worse, they are ignoring a made-in-Canada model that is saving lives in Alberta. That province has become a beacon of hope for how lives can be turned around with professional, caring drug treatment services. Overdose deaths, that's worth clapping for. Overdose deaths are down in that jurisdiction by 30%, while BC overdose deaths continue to climb. We know that merely providing safe supply drugs will never get people out of an addiction cycle. When Conservatives form government, we will follow Alberta's example and build world-class recovery communities and implement similar services around the country to save lives. We also need to consider the impact that the so-called Safe Supply program is having on our youth. On the streets of Vancouver, people living with addictions are selling these cheap drugs to kids, then use the money to buy stronger, deadlier fentanyl. Impressionable youth are accessing this cheap, plentiful supply of highly addictive drugs as a gateway to harder, more dangerous substances. In plain terms, the Safe Supply program is a direct threat to the lives of our youth. A BC coroner report confirmed that overdose victims are trending younger and that opioid addiction among BC's youth is increasing. Speaking as a mother, we cannot allow the government to ignore the evidence when our teenage sons and daughters are lying face down on a sidewalk in a zombie-like state. Safe Supply drugs are putting youth on the path to hardcore addictions, and this needs to stop. Too many parents have lost children to drug overdoses in this country. The story of Jack Bodie from Burnaby is far too common. Jack was a productive and active 17-year-old boy who was deeply loved by his family. Tragically, Jack snorted half a pill laced with fentanyl. Inhaling the drug slowed down Jack's breathing and heartbeat, and within minutes his entire system shut down and he passed away. Jack's death sent his family into deep and profound grief. His dad, now a treatment and recovery advocate, maintains that the real tragedy is that there are thousands of families across Canada dealing with the same grief that he faced over the death of a child due to a drug overdose. Vancouver Police Constable David Steverding works on Vancouver's downtown east side, and he's a member of the Odd Squad, a group of dedicated police officers who provide drug use prevention education to youth throughout Canada. The constable has worked with hundreds of people living with addiction and their families, and he said, and I quote, "People's comments are often that drug use is a personal choice and that it's a victimless crime. The people that are overlooked in these comments are family members and friends. In a lot of cases, they are absolutely helpless. They have to stand by and watch as that person spirals downhill," end quote. To the families who have tragically lost sons and daughters to a drug overdose, my message is this: we will make sure your child did not die in vain. We will scrap the dangerous social experiment of Safe Supply and ensure other kids who struggle with addictions get the treatment they need so they can come home to their families drug-free. And the consultants and Big Pharma who turbocharged opioid marketing will pay for it. We will hold them to account as government policy. Recovery, treatment, rehabilitation, that is how we're going to bring home our loved ones. It's how we will turn hurt into hope. It is the common sense of the common people. Hope is possible, and hope is on the way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.